Hi, crime enthusiasts. This is your host Ashita, and today I am going to talk about a quiet morning in the Australian countryside that takes a chilling turn. James Alfred Smith, an electrical linesman, is working on a remote property near Sutton Road, a desolate dirt track linking Queen Lien to the federal highway. From the distance, something catches his eye behind a fallen log. At first, he thinks it's a discarded mannequin. But as he steps closer, a horrifying reality sets in. It's not a mannequin, it's the lifeless body of Mary Bertram. Missing since Sunday night, Mary had been hidden so well that even a passerby wouldn't have noticed her. But fate, or sheer luck, ensured that she wouldn't remain lost forever. What happened to Mary? And why was the body left in such an isolated place? This is her story. Mary Annie Chapman's life, like so many before her, is a patchwork of known facts and unanswered questions. Born on April 7, 1947, to Agnes Chapman, the details of her early years remain elusive, with no official records or family accounts shedding light on her childhood. The identity of her father is an even deeper mystery. Neither her obituary nor her death records provide a name, leaving an unanswered gap in her history. What little is known suggests she was alone growing up. At least 3 siblings shared her world, though the nature of their relationship and the dynamics of the household remain unclear. Despite the mysteries surrounding her early years, one defining moment in Mary's life is well documented: her marriage. In 1964, just at 17 years old, she became the wife of Walter Kenneth Bertram, a man 7 years her senior who was known to most as Joe. Walter was a carpenter by trade, someone skilled with his hands, shaping wood into something purposeful and lasting, a stark contrast to the fleeting nature of life he would share with Mary. Their marriage marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that started in the town of Seymour, Victoria. However, their roots were there not permanent, and by 1967, electoral roll records show that the couple had moved to Canberra, seeking a different future in the capital. As the years passed, by 1974, Walter and Mary were parents to 3 young boys, each at a tender and impressionable age, 8, 5 and 4. They had made a home at 53rd Sparford Crescent in the quiet suburb of Farrer, a place where the children played, where Mary took on the role of a mother, and where life unfolded in the way it often does, slowly, in small ordinary moments. Mary herself was petite, standing at 5 feet 3 inches with a medium build and striking sandy blonde hair. She was, as newspapers at that time described, an undeniably attractive woman. Just 1 week before her 28th birthday, Mary's story came to a sudden and devastating end. By the early months of 1974, the cracks in the Bertram's marriage had grown into deep fractures. What had once been a partnership had now deteriorated into little more than an arrangement. So strained was their relationship that, during the inquest into Mary's murder, the coroner bluntly described their union as a marriage only in name. Testimonies from friends and relatives paint a picture of a woman who was caught between a life she no longer wanted and responsibilities she couldn't abandon. Walter Bertram, Mary's husband, later admitted that she went out without informing him of her whereabouts, a fact that seemed to trouble him little, if at all. Nancy Mills, Mary's cousin, recalled that Mary had confided in her more than once about her growing desire to leave Walter altogether. However, not everyone believed that she would take such a step. Lorraine Cowley, a mutual friend of the couple, said Mary had told her that she wouldn't leave Walter, not because she loved him, but because of their children. Interestingly, Lorraine also noted that Walter never seemed particularly disturbed by the disintegration of his marriage, as if he had either accepted it or perhaps never truly cared. In the final moments of her life, it seems likely that Mary sought solace outside her marriage. Though the coroner's comments during the inquest, now read as outdated and judgmental, they indicate that Mary may have been romantically involved with at least one other man. He stated, with a tone of moral disapproval, that there is evidence the deceased indulged in sexual activity with other male, and that she was a woman who kept rendezvous at all hours. Whether these remarks were based only on substantial findings or simply a reflection of societal attitude at that time, they reinforce what neighbors had already suggested. Mary received visitors at her home, often men who would arrive in their cars, stay for roughly an hour, and then leave. One particular visitor stood out. Neighbors frequently saw a Holden HQ sedan, blue with a white roof, pulling up at the Bertram residence in the daytime. The driver, a man who was never publicly identified, appeared to be a regular presence in Mary's life. There were also whispers that Mary spent time at Queanbeyan Lakes Club, possibly meeting other men there. After her murder, police approached club members, asking if they recall seeing her on the night she vanished. Their inquiries were vague, cryptic even, hinting that they believed Mary was more than just a casual visitor to the club. The last weekend of March 1974 was by all accounts unremarkable, at least on the surface. On Saturday, March 38th, Mary left home around 7:45 in her white Mini and returned about an hour and a half later. Investigators later concluded that she had likely spent time with a man, but they were never able to confirm his identity. A woman who refused to disclose her own name or location repeatedly called the police with a single piece of information. The man's name was Bob. Whether Bob was connected to the blue and white sedan or whether he was someone else entirely remains unknown. The following day, Sunday, March 31st, passed uneventfully. One of Mary's acquaintances, a woman interested in purchasing a child's cubby house, visited her home at that day. She later told police that nothing about Mary's demeanor or behavior had seemed unusual, but by that evening, Mary Bertram would vanish without a trace. According to Walter, the last time he saw his wife was around 7:40 p.m. in the bathroom of their home. Shortly afterward, he went to bed. By the time he woke up the next morning, Mary was gone. But it wasn't until Walter who first noticed her absence. It was one of their young sons. The child came to him early on Monday, April 1st, and told him that Mary wasn't in her bed. This detail is significant because, as was later revealed during the inquest, Walter and Mary had not shared a bedroom for several years. Walter's reaction to his wife's disappearance was strangely resigned. Rather than assuming she had gone out for the morning or even that something might have happened to her, he quickly concluded that she had left him for good. The conclusion seemed oddly final for a husband whose wife had supposedly walked out without taking her car, her children, or even her personal belongings. Others who knew Mary were far less convinced. Nancy Mills, her cousin, firmly believed that if Mary had made the decision to leave Walter permanently, she would have taken the boys with her. It was not in her character to abandon them. The fact that almost all of her possessions remained in the house only reinforced the idea that Mary had no plans to disappear voluntarily. Then came an unsettling revelation from a woman named Cheryl Green. Cheryl had responded to an advertisement Walter placed seeking a housekeeper. When she arrived at his home to inquire about the job, Walter made a startling comment. He told her that he wasn't sure whether Mary had run away or been murdered. It was an odd thing to say. At this stage, there was no evidence that Mary had been harmed, and most people in his position would have clung to the hope that their missing spouse would return. But what stood out to most Cheryl wasn't Walter's words, it was his demeanor. He didn't seem sad, he didn't seem worried. In fact, she got the distinct impression that Walter had actually seen Mary leave the house that night. On April 1st, Walter formally reported Mary missing, but by then, she had been gone for hours. What really happened to Mary Bertram on the night of March 31st? Who was the man she had been seen with the night before? And why did Walter seem so certain that she wasn't coming back? As the investigation unfolded, the answer would prove to be even more unsettling than the questions. It was a late Thursday morning, April 4th, 1974, when James Alfred Smith, an electrical linesman employed by the Southern Tablelands County Council, set out to perform routine work in a field on the Merrily property. The landscape was quiet, the kind of rural stillness that would make a person feel as if they were the only souls for miles. The road he was, Sutton Road, was an unpaved, lonely stretch of dirt at that time, linking Queen Lane with the Federal Highway. It was the sort of place where travelers rarely stopped unless they had to. As Smith walked, something peculiar caught his eye beyond a fallen log, roughly a meter back from the road. At first glance, he thought it was a mannequin, a disturbingly frequent assumption made in such discoveries. The pale form was positioned in a way that suggested it had been deliberately placed there, tucked just far enough out of sight that even someone walking along the road would not have immediately noticed it. But as Smith stopped closer, a grim realization sank in. This was no mannequin. It was a woman's lifeless body. Horrified, he immediately alerted authorities. Investigators arrived to assess the scene, and it wasn't long before they identified the victim, Mary Bertram, who had been reported missing 4 days earlier. Her disappearance had left her family and friends in a state of distress, and now their worst fears were confirmed. In many ways, it was sheer luck that Mary's body was found when it was. Despite being so close to the road, the way she had been positioned meant she was well hidden from passerby. If not for Smith's presence that morning, it could have been days, perhaps weeks, before she was discovered. The delay could have meant further deterioration of forensic evidence, making it even harder for investigators to piece together what had happened to her. Initially, early assessments led police to believe that Mary had been killed shortly before her discovery. However, forensic examination soon painted a different picture. During the inquest, the estimated time of death was adjusted based on evidence from the post-mortem examination. The findings suggested that Mary had likely been dead for 48 to 72 hours before she was found. This placed her time of death somewhere between the night of Monday, April 1, and the early hours of Wednesday, April 3. Although it remained possible that she had been killed the same night she vanished, Sunday, March 31st, the examiner deemed it more probable that she had lived for at least another day or two before her murderer ended her life. The cause of death was quite determined: a strangulation. A ligature mark encircled her entire neck, the unmistakable evidence of forceful asphyxiation. But that wasn't all. It was revealed, though not publicly disclosed until years later, that Mary had also been sexually assaulted. This harrowing fact added another layer of cruelty to an already tragic case. The presence of large bruises on her left hip indicated she had suffered a significant impact before or during the attack, possibly from a violent struggle or a forceful blow delivered by her assailant. Additionally, her body bore numerous parchment bruises, injuries that forensic experts recognize as being inflicted post-mortem due to the distinctive discoloration caused by the absence of blood circulation at the time of impact. Investigators swiftly concluded that Mary had not been killed at the location where she was found. The evidence was clear. The markings on Mary's back suggested that she had lain on a hard surface, most likely the ground, for a considerable period after her death. This would have been for up to 12 hours post-mortem, meaning that after she was killed, her body remained in one position before being moved to the spot where Smith found her. The area around Mary's body showed no evidence of a violent altercation. There were no disturbed patches of earth, no broken twigs, no indications that she had fought for her life there. Nor were there any drag marks leading to where she was placed, reinforcing the belief that she had been transported to this location rather than killed on the spot. The way that Mary's body was positioned suggested an unsettling level of deliberation. She was not tossed haphazardly, nor was she buried or concealed in a panic. Instead, she was carefully placed behind the log, ensuring that she remained hidden from immediate view. Mary Bertram's identity was made public just 2 days after her body was discovered, swiftly bringing her tragic fate to the forefront of local and national attention. Her funeral was held on April 11, 1974, a somber gathering where family, friends, and members of the community came together to mourn a life cut short. Even as Mary was laid to rest, the investigation into her murder was gathering momentum. Law enforcement agencies across multiple regions, Canberra, Sydney, Queanbeyan, Goulburn, and Cooma, combined their efforts, forming a large task force dedicated to solving the case. The sheer scale of the operation reflected the gravity of the crime, and in those first critical days, investigators were optimistic that they would find answers. Authorities made an urgent public appeal for information, a move that prompted an overwhelming response. The case captured imagination of the public, and hundreds of calls flooded in, offering tips, reported sightings, and even speculative theories about what might have happened to Mary in her final hours. Detectives meticulously documented each piece of information, generating 1,000 pages of recorded interviews. The level of public interest was unprecedented, with members of the community desperate to assist in any way they could. The street where Mary had lived, Sparford Crescent, became a focal point of the investigation. Detectives canvassed the area repeatedly, questioning residents multiple times in the hope that someone had seen or heard something that could break the case wide open. Did anyone witness an unfamiliar car parked outside the Bertram Hood that night. Did they hear raised voices, a struggle, or anything out of the ordinary? Investigators left no stone unturned, but despite their exhaustive efforts, the case remained frustratingly stagnant. Leads that had initially seemed promising gradually unraveled under scrutiny, and within just 2 months, every potential avenue of inquiry had gone cold. The initial flurry of momentum was lost, and investigators faced the grim reality that Mary Bertram's killer might never be found. Despite their best efforts, no arrests were ever made, and to this day, no one has been charged in connection with her murder. With no suspect in custody, the legal system would only offer one last opportunity for clarity: a coronial inquest. Held between October 1 and October 3, 1974, at the Queen Being Coroner's Court. The proceedings were presided over by Coroner D.F. Leo. There was hope that, through a careful examination of the evidence, the inquest might provide long-awaited answers about Mary's final moments. Instead, it became yet another frustrating chapter in an investigation that seemed doomed to stagnation. The inquest did little to further the understanding of how or why Mary had been murdered. In fact, one of the most notable aspects was the coroner's willingness to make judgmental remarks about Mary's private life. Rather than focusing solely on the forensic and investigative aspects of the case, he made disparaging comments about her potential extramarital relationships, a distraction that did little to serve the pursuit of justice. Ultimately, the inquest confirmed what he had already been suspected. Mary had died from asphyxia due to strangulation. However, a crucial question remained unanswered. Where had she been killed? The coroner was unable to determine whether her life had been taken at her home, in another location, or even by someone she had willingly accompanied that night. One piece of forensic evidence did emerge during the proceedings, though its implications remain uncertain to this day. The findings indicated that Mary had engaged in sexual intercourse between 12 and 20 hours before her death. This revelation raised immediate questions. Had she been sexually assaulted by her killer? Or had she voluntarily been with someone else in the hours leading up to her murder? The inquest failed to clarify whether this information supported claims of a sexual attack or if it pointed to an unrelated encounter that had taken place before she crossed paths with whoever ended her life. With the coroner unable to establish a definitive timeline or identify a suspect, the inquest ended with more questions than answers. Mary's death remained an unsolved mystery, leaving her family without closure and investigators with no clear path forward. Decades have passed, and while forensic science had advanced, the silence surrounding Mary's case has remained unbroken. Somewhere, someone knows the truth. But until that truth is uncovered, Mary Bertram's story will remain one of the most unsettling mysteries that continue to haunt the corridors of Australian criminal history. 2 weeks after Mary's body was discovered, a police received a tip on April 18, 1974, that her missing belongings could be found at the Ferrer tip. Unfortunately, by the time officers arrived, reports ranged from 15 to hundreds. The site had been bulldozed just hours earlier. A joint act and NSW police task force, equipped with respirators and pitchforks, sifted through compacted rubbish, searching for Mary's missing clothing and jewelry. Public appeals were also made for any removed items, including footwear or a broken radio. but her belongings were never recovered. Despite a $10,000 Australian reward, equivalent to 100,000 Australian dollars today, being offered throughout the 1970s, no further leads emerged. And, as with all cold cases, speculation and theories abound, and I find myself drawn to one possibility above all others, that the answer to Mary Bertram's tragic demise lies in the identity of a man she was romantically involved towards the end of her life. The existence of such a man has never definitely been proven, let alone his identity revealed. But the circumstantial evidence suggests he may have played a pivotal role in the mystery. If Walter Bertram's account of the final hours he saw his wife is to be believed, then logic dictates that Mary must have left the house willingly, without her car, and in the company of someone else. The idea that she simply walked away into the night, undetected by any neighbors or passerby, or that she used a taxi or public transport without telling anyone later recalling seeing her, seems unlikely. A trusted companion, someone she would willingly get into a vehicle with, seems the most plausible explanation. Then there are the peculiar details surrounding her death that suggest involvement of another man rather than Walter. The missing denture is particularly striking, as is the evidence that Mary engaged in sexual activity at some point during the day before her death, though not at the time of it. These details paint the picture of a woman who was involved with someone outside her marriage, someone who could have very well been present on the night she disappeared. And yet, the evidence remains frustratingly elusive. A particularly perplexing piece of testimony came from a 1976 witness who claimed to have seen a man dumping Mary's belongings at the ferry tip 2 years after her murder. If this account is to be believed, it would strongly suggest that Mary's lover was responsible for her death. Yet, the lack of corroboration and the time gap between the alleged sighting and the crime itself makes it difficult to accept this claim as definitive. The deeper question remains, which man could have been responsible for Mary's death? Was it Walter, a husband seething with resentment over the slow disintegration of his marriage, pushed beyond the brink by the idea of his wife leaving him for another? Or was it another man entirely, someone she trusted enough to go with on that fateful night, only for him to betray her in the most horrifying way? It is difficult to ignore Walter's action in the aftermath of Mary's disappearance. The manner in which he so quickly concluded that his wife had left him permanently, his lack of apparent distress, and his unusual behavior in hiring a housekeeper within days. All these details cast a long shadow of suspicion. The missing radio too stands out. If it was indeed used as a murder weapon, perhaps the cord was utilized to strangle Mary, then it strongly suggests that she was killed inside her own home, but could be a red herring. Could the radio have been sold or disposed of earlier, making its absence unrelated to the crime? Another oddity is the missing wedding photograph. There was no known mention of it being removed from the home before Mary vanished, and its absence raises unsettling possibilities. Was it taken by the killer as some kind of macabre trophy, or was it deliberately removed to craft the illusion that Mary had voluntarily left her husband, taking only a few seemingly random possessions? Then, there is the matter of her clothing. The almost entirely red outfit she was found in feels deliberately chosen, a strikingly specific detail that seems too bizarre to be coincidence. Could this have been Walter's doing? a way to exert control over the narrative of her disappearance? Or did someone else dress her in these clothes, post-mortem, as some kind of twisted symbolism? A compelling theory is that Mary finally told Walter she was leaving him for another man and planned to take the children with her. If Walter felt little emotional attachment to his wife, that may not have mattered to him, but his sons were another matter entirely. There is a certain possessiveness that some men exhibit over their children, especially to their sons. To Walter may have been bearable, but his children, unthinkable. It's not difficult to imagine an argument between them could have spiraled into something far worse. Ultimately, the case of Mary Bertram is one steeped into ambiguity and frustrating gaps in evidence. While it's tempting to believe that DNA technology could one day provide a breakthrough, the reality is that without a key piece of evidence resurfacing, the crime may remain forever unsolved. The coroner's somber conclusion rings true. There is little hope that this case will ever be resolved. And yet, Mary's story deserves to be told. Her memory should not fade into obscurity, relegated to a forgotten chapter of Canberra's history. Even if justice can never be served, perhaps awareness of her case will ensure that she is remembered, not just as a victim, but as a woman whose life was tragically cut short. And so, we arrive at the end of Mary Bertram's story. At last, the parts that we know. A woman who deserved more than the shadows of speculation, more than whispers about her personal life, and certainly more than to become just another name in an ever-growing list of unsolved murders. Her case remains frozen in time, a puzzle with missing pieces that may never be found. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to Mary that night. Someone knows who took her life, who discarded her like an afterthought on a lonely stretch of road. Whether it was a crime of passion, a premeditated act, or something else entirely, the truth has been buried under decades of silence, lost in the folds of time, like her missing belongings at the ferry tip. But let's not allow Mary to be forgotten. The more we speak her name, the more we tell her story, the more we keep her alive in memory. Maybe, just maybe, the right person will hear it. Maybe the right conscience will stop. Because even after all these years, justice is still waiting. Rest in peace, Mary. You're not forgotten. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast on Spotify and YouTube so you never miss an update. I appreciate you joining me today. Have an amazing weekend ahead. Until then, stay safe, crime enthusiasts.